If you want to get a new Xbox controller, get this instead. There is two companies in the controller market that I really look upon into. One is 8BitDo and another is Gulikit, which both of these companies cater to Nintendo market. So after a few okay performance from my previous controller, I bought a new controller which is Gulikit King Kong Pro, and this controller was on review for quite a while. I believe about 4-5 months ago, and actually it was on the shelf like 9 months ago, very long over here. But I just realized that I missed a lot of stuff with this new controller from Gulikit. So my experience with Gulikit controller is not so easy. I have an old Gulikit controller, but the truth is, after few months, it's actually broke on me, especially the bumper button. I tried to hate the new controller so much. I spent a lot of weeks trying it on various games. A lot of games like Shadow of Mordor, Tomb Raider, Apex Legends. Even I play on Genshin Impact. I think this is my best controller right now. It's actually my favorite. This new controller have a new button, which is a mechanical button, and one of the most, I think the biggest thing about this controller that Gulikit bring to the controller market is the new no drift joystick. It's so good to the point that any old controller, it feels very bad. So the new joystick actually have this Hall sensing. Actually, it's not new. The previous controller have the Hall sensing on the trigger. The current controller they implement on the joystick, and it's actually very good. It have a near zero center. Basically, there is no drift. Absolutely, they deliver on their words. Common joystick use potentiometer, which is measure the voltage by varying the resistance. But the new controller with the Hall sensing use magnetic movement, and it's measure the movement, disturb the magnetic fields, and then change the current. So that's what it measures. It always keep the drifting to zero by keep recalibrating itself each time you move your joystick. All the time, the controller always at the center. But the thing is, Hall sensor is not a new technology. It's actually very old, and actually is already inside Dreamcast. But the problem of the Hall sensing in the Dreamcast, it's actually very old, and it's bulky, and at that time the signal processing, the chip manufacturing, microchips is not so advanced. We are still using Pentium at that point. So new controller, I think, prove that our technology have advanced so much to the point that we can manufacture an efficient joystick at this point. Actually, the design of joystick never changed from the past 25 years or even more. We keep using the same joystick all the time. Gosh. So it just material change, and then that's about it. I as far as I remember, we just changed the materials. Maybe a bit of improvement, but in reality the design is still the same. They don't eliminate the big problem about joystick. One is the drifting, another is the tension. So Gulikit controller is actually very smooth. I think it's one of the best in the market. It's not as smooth as Xiaomi. Xiaomi is probably the smoothest that I ever felt. In fact, just using plastic, but this one have a metal ring. Fun fact that you can actually remove this keycap. So now you have like separate keycap. Thing is, I don't see any replacement keycap for this. So even on the Gulikit website, they don't sell the keycap. I don't know why I call it keycap. It's not keycap. What you call this? Thumbstick? Thumbstick caps? Yeah, thumbstick caps. It will take about 2-3 months for the ring to start to get smooth. I just tested this for about months. At first you try, it doesn't feel as smooth as what you feel on other controller, but over time it will get smooth. Another thing about the new joystick, there is a clicking. If you compare the clicking on the old controller, you can hear the sound. It feels like reloading a gun, but the new one is it's actually very smooth. I believe they changed the switch. I like the new switch actually. The click is much smoother. It's a lot shorter, and the old one is very deep. Not saying that it's bad. The new one, you feel like less resistant to click. The accuracy of this joystick is very good, to the point that it makes other controller really bad. It will have like near zero centering. I don't know why they want to go that far, but yeah, I think that's a good sign, because security never change. If you compare to Xbox controller, usually you get around 12 to 15%. Even other controller, my best controller, which is 8-bit do, even then cannot match this Gulikit controller. Another new feature about this controller that they bring is the new mechanical switch. Wait, it's not new? Oh, yeah. Oh, SteelSeries already made the switch. So yeah, it's actually not new. Hybrid switch defeat the whole purpose of mechanical switch in the first place. However, this hybrid switch is such a massive upgrade to what we usually experience in common controller, which use membrane button. Let me say this first. Mechanical switch term has become a gray area term, which has been used in promoting mechanical keyboard, and it used excessively to the point that when we refer mechanical switch, usually you refer to keyboard switch. What Gulikit did here is very similar to what inside Apex, where they make a hybrid mechanical switch. But the thing is, hybrid switch is horrible. Hybrid switch, I don't know why people want to use hybrid switch. Just buy Otemu. Even the cheapest Otemu still much better than hybrid switch. But for controller, I think this is brilliant. The old Gulikit controller use membrane button. The new controller, which is the mechanical switch, actually almost as close as my 5 years old Xbox controller. They emulate the membrane switch almost perfect. If you compare side by side with the membrane switch, you can actually feel the difference. If you just using this controller alone, you don't feel that it's actually any different from membrane. The new switch doesn't eliminate the common problem of membrane switch, especially on the carbon contact. But the current membrane keyboard, if you get a good one, can last for 3 to 5 years. My keyboard laptop, I use excessively for the past 10 years, and it takes almost 10 years for the keyboard to start to break. So for this switch, for this new switch, it's entirely depend on Gulikit what is the quality of the carbon contact they put in for its longevity. It's not all bell and whistle with this switch. This hybrid switch most likely the scratchiest switch that you will ever have in your lifetime. If you at least care about mechanical keyboard, this switch is a felony offense, a higher tier crime. It drives me crazy at some point because my B button is actually the scratchiest button out of all the others. It feels like green switch while the rest is like brown switch. So you can actually just loop it, right? Yeah. So that's the problem. It's not easy to loop it. You need to open and then you need to disassemble the controller first. The contact is actually at the bottom, so lubing is actually taking a lot of work, and liquid lube is not an option because it will drip down. The best way is to lube with solid lubricant. It's not a very difficult task. It's just time consuming job. The controller is actually very easy to open. I think it's one of the easiest controller out of all of my other controller. Another easiest controller, I think the closest and the easiest controller that to disassemble to repair is Nintendo Switch controller. This one is very easy to repair. It doesn't as easy to repair because of part availability. Most likely you cannot find the spare part and you need to buy a new one. Other manufacturer like DualSense, Sony Xbox, there is a lot of spare part for it, and you can find the spare part from the third party. That's the problem of third party controller. If the parts broke, you cannot fix it because the part availability is very scarce. I loop all of my controller switch because I hate button to start. Even this Xbox controller is actually loop, and you just loop once and it's good to go for 3 to 5 years. My old Gulikit controller, the first day I got it, it stuck at the bottom. So I open it, lube it, and it's good to go. The current controller have better Bluetooth connectivity. It's not perfect, but it's better. A lot better than previous. The previous controller took me about 10 seconds to connect to the PC, but this one is almost instantaneous. There is a time when I want to connect inside the games, but it doesn't connect. I need to go to the desktop first and then come back in. But it doesn't happen all the time. It's very seldomly happens. So just be aware with it. The previous controller has this rubber texture to it. I'll be honest, I really hate the previous controller texture. It's not amazing. It's horrible. But the new controller has this matte powder coating. It feels much better on hands. It doesn't feel like the skin-like texture that what Gulikit said on their website. It feels exactly like a matte paint on a car. They also add grip texture like on Xbox, but the new coating on the new controller made the grip more present. I believe it's because of the new coating makes this, there is an extra layer, there is the extra scratchiness to the grip. I think they want to follow Xbox design on the grip, but the new coating on the new controller makes the controller feels much grippier than my Xbox. Other stuff like gyro and the customization is still the same like the previous controller. They also try to push the RPG button is not a macro, but from what I feel and what I experience, it is a macro. Pro version have 10-minute record and then the non-pro version have 10-second record. I don't see why there is a reason you want to have a 10-minute session of macro, but if that is what you need, sure, go on. So just to note that the macro only works at one instant. There is only one profile that you can only save at an instance. You can actually transfer the macro to the PC, but the thing is, it's actually a hassle than a convenience. In fact, I believe the macro, the RPG button is actually what makes this controller is not something that I will recommend to others because they miss one of the community in the games, which is the pro players. Pro player plays with various equipment, various devices. Some use big controller, 6 for the fighting games, and then some use Dreamcast, some use Xbox, DualSense, whatever games it is. People usually allow you to play any controller that you want because you want to play at the same level of effectiveness as others, regardless of your capability. It's such a shame that if they remove this, I can definitely recommend this controller to anyone. But if you're not a pro player, yes, I think it's a good controller. But if you are using controller in any of your game and you play competitive, I think Xbox controller and PlayStation still rule, and it's much a better controller in that sense. The customization is actually limited despite you can actually customize all of the button. You can actually also customize the vibration strength. You can actually customize the gyro sensitivity and trigger button sensitivity. But I still prefer having an onboard memory profile because it's a lot easier. Most of the time you have one games and then there's this one function that I want to use, and then I want to change, I just change to another profile. But for this controller there is no other option. Instead, as you need to export your setting then import a new one for new games on a PC. You're also missing a headphone jack and docking port like what is on Xbox controller. Also, it doesn't have a back button. It's not necessary or a deal breaker, but it's actually really great to have a customizable back button for me. Unless Microsoft and Sony add a back button to their entry-level controller, I don't think that we will see a back button become a standard in the future. I much prefer my joystick click on the back button, but yeah, it's not yet the day set by Microsoft. So there is two versions of this King Kong controller. One is $70 and another one is about $50 to $60. Sometimes you can get ads on sale for 45 for the non-pro version. But the problem is the only thing that the pro controller add to the non-pro controller that actually worth $20 difference is the texture. Other than that, I don't feel like it's a necessary addition. In fact, the non-pro version still have the macro function. The only problem is getting a non-pro version in store is a lot harder than getting a pro version. Most likely, if you want the non-pro version, you need to buy it online. Just to be aware of, the old controller still written as NS09 and the new one they also designed as a model NS09. The non-pro version is NS08. But you must make sure that you get the King Kong 2 Pro controller or King Kong 2, and the only way to know the difference between these two controllers is the button. This the old button and this one is the new button. The font is actually at the top for the new button. For the old button, the font is actually at the bottom. From the side, you can see that the button is actually protruded more. However, for the new controller, the button is actually close to the Xbox controller. Also, the box design for the new controller is actually white and the old controller is actually black. So just to be aware of, because some of the stores still sell the old controller. If the old controller is cheap, very cheap, then I suggest you get it. But I don't see a reason why you want to get it, because 8-bit Do Pro 2 controller exists. 10 years ago, I thought that controller advancement is dead. Drifting is so much associated with controller, making that people tend to stay away from using controller at all. Using controller on PC feels like a second-class citizen because how much the technology has advanced for the keyboard and mouse. However, Gulikit proved that it's not yet the time. Innovation is not yet dead. There is so much can be done on this small device. And Gulikit proved that this company is on the right track to make this happen. So what do you think about Gulikit controller? Is it the best controller you can have? Comment, like and subs or whatever. And see you again. Bye.